Well, we begin in Hong Kong, where there have been fights between police and protesters as tensions rise over a contentious plan to change the extradition law. Well, this was the scene not long ago outside the legislature building. We've heard that tear gas has been fired. Earlier, debate on the bill was delayed. Now, this law change would allow criminal suspects in Hong Kong to be sent for trial in mainland China. Opponents, though, believe China is trying to take more control of the semi-autonomous territory and chip away at civil liberties. Well, Sarah Clarke is in Hong Kong and joins us now live from Hong Kong. Sarah, the second reading of the bill has been delayed for now, but we're seeing some quite angry scenes from the territory. What's been the reaction where you are?
Well, look, the protesters gave until 3 p.m. local time, which was about an hour ago. That was their deadline for the government to withdraw that bill. Obviously, that didn't happen. In the last 15 or so minutes, we've got a number of police, the riot police, have moved in. They're trying to clear the streets from one of the very busy areas on the other side, on the right-hand side of where I am, called Harcourt Road. They're clearing protesters from that side. In front of me, and you might be able to see behind me, we've got a couple of hundred police here and in front of me who've just moved in. And I think what their aim is now to try and clear these streets. So Matthew Chung, who's the Chief Secretary of the government, he said before one of his requests or demands for the protesters was to clear the streets. There's a lot of traffic congestion and the streets have been blocked from about 6 a.m. this morning when metal barricades were put in around the Legislative Council building or the government headquarters to stop access. And the protesters have been successful in blocking access to the government headquarters. Some of the politicians haven't been able to make it into the government headquarters, and of course that bill has now been suspended, or certainly the reading of that bill has been suspended for now. But both sides are putting deadlines on each other, and at this stage it looks like the police have come to their deadline and that they are keen to clear the roads. You might also be able to see behind me all the umbrellas up. All the protesters have put up umbrellas reminiscent of what we saw in the Occupy protests. Apparently there's been tear gas fired on one side. That's reports only. I can't confirm that. But certainly the situation here is ramping up as we speak.
Well, Sarah, interesting that you mentioned the umbrella protest. We all know how that ended. We saw a significant amount of protest that lasted for several months, but ultimately the government refusing to give in. Is that what we're likely to see this time round? Because the bill reading has been delayed, but certainly not thrown out altogether.
Well, look, I can hear some shots behind me. I don't know what type of shots they are or what's happening behind, but certainly the government has certainly said that it's going to move through, it's going to push ahead with this no matter what, and it will. I've mentioned earlier that the government has the numbers as the majority in Parliament, and that means this bill will be passed. It's just a matter of time. Hong Kong's Chief Executive, Carrie Lam, has said that she wants it passed by July, or certainly by the end of this month. So the government will push ahead no matter what. And so for these protesters, the only opposition they can really show is being on the streets, because they know they're not going to win long term with regards to getting this bill withdrawn.
OK, Sarah Clarke, you mentioned there that you were hearing some kind of shots. We're getting live pictures coming in from across different parts of the city. We are seeing tear gas. Certainly, it does seem to be deteriorating quite rapidly. You're in the middle of an area of protest there. What sort of reaction are you seeing immediately around you?
Well, we've got everyone, all the protesters certainly behind me, which are on the front line. They are kitted up. They've got the gas masks on, they've got their umbrellas, they've got shields. But of course, you've got the riot police. They've got batons, they've got weapons, and they've got their shields as well. And they have indicated all along that they are keen to keep or clear these roads. So I get the indication that we're coming up to the end of the day, the end of the business day here in Hong Kong, and I'm assuming their instruction is to make sure those roads are clear, the congestion is removed from these roads, because as I said before, we're in the central part of Hong Kong Island. This is the central business district. A lot of businesses are closed around here today simply because people could not get in. So I think these police, there's been a standoff from the early hours of this morning between the protesters and police, but this is certainly the most heated we've seen it all day.
Give us a sense, Sarah, if you would, of the appetite for continuing these protests. Certainly the umbrella protests a few years ago, they managed to continue for several months at least. Certainly, is there a sense from the protesters that you've spoken to that they're willing to push it this time for a similar period of time?
Yes, most of the protesters we've spoken to, they said they will be here until the vote, until this extradition bill is withdrawn, and clearly that's not going to happen. So their indication was that they will stay on the streets for as long as they have to. And of course, as Occupy Hong Kong protests, they're on the streets for 78 days. There was a tear gas fight in the early days, but for the rest of the time, the protesters sat on the streets. It was quite a very peaceful rally. This indication is I think the government might be taking a different tactic. This time, they don't want the roads blocked for that period of time. By the looks of what's happening behind me, I think they want the roads cleared and they want life to go back to normal. So that could mean there could be some clashes or more clashes between police, protesters and authorities over the next few hours at least.
Sarah, just before we leave you, for any viewers just joining us now, we are bringing you pictures from Hong Kong where scuffles have broken out, and they do seem to be rather dramatic pictures that we are seeing. Certainly tear gas being fired and a lot of movement on the streets. Sarah, these are dramatic pictures that we are showing. Certainly there is also another battle being fought, and that is for public opinion, and these kinds of pictures we're getting out of Hong Kong do not show the authorities in a good light.
Well, no, we saw the protests on Sunday. We saw 1 million people on the streets, and that was the public opinion expressed loud and clear. The public, they want the extradition bill withdrawn, and of course, as I mentioned, it's not going to happen. So this is why we've got the people on the streets. This is why it's happening now, simply because the bill is having a second reading, or was meant to have a second reading today, and the government has now set it down for a vote next week. Now, that could be delayed, but certainly with regards to the authorities, these police are under instruction to do what they've been told, and obviously their instruction is to clear the streets and move things on.
OK, Sarah Clarke, for now, thank you very much. Sarah Clarke joining us live from Hong Kong.